Hello everyone, it's Maive. Welcome back to my channel for another fantasy tutorial. I've had so many requests to make more fantasy houses, and being one of my favorite things to make, I'm more than happy to oblige. So today I'll be sharing with you how I made a fairy house using a jar and polymer clay, inspired by my mini fairy houses from a few months ago. For this project I used a regular glass jar because I wanted to turn the house into a lantern, and I used it upside down so that the opening is on the bottom. Next I covered the jar in a layer of fimo liquid, and this is so that the clay sticks to the jar. I used black polymer clay because of the contrast that the clay will have with the paint later on, but this is something I like to do, so of course you can use any color clay you like. Make sure to press the clay firmly onto the glass so there aren't any air bubbles. You can look through the inside to see if there's any big pockets of air, and if there are, you can make a slit in the clay and release it. Smooth all the joints down and trim the edges to neaten them up. To add texture, I used a toothbrush, but you can use anything you want. Using a circular cutter, I cut out 3 windows and I traced a line after making the first one, just so they were all at the same level. Then I baked the jar for about 15 minutes at 110 degrees Celsius. Once cool, I shaped some tinfoil around the top of the jar. Then I covered the top of the jar with clay, always using fimo liquid to stick it. I got rid of all the excess clay and blended the clays together. You can use some liquid clay to soften the clay a bit so it's easier to blend. After adding texture, I spread fimo liquid inside the tin foil and placed it on the clay, pressing and securing the foil into the clay. I carried on adding tinfoil on top to build the roof and shaping it at the same time. I used my hands to start with, and once the tinfoil starts getting too hard to shape, I used an acrylic rolling pin to shape it, rolling it on it and actually hitting the foil as I would have with a hammer. Once I was happy with the shape, I secured the tin foil in place with masking tape. You can keep adding tin foil to achieve the shape you want and secure it with more tape. Next, I spread fimo liquid on the roof so I could add clay. Cut away the excess and blend everything. I added more clay on the edge to make it wider, but you can make the roof in any shape you want. Don't forget to blend the underside as well. And because my roof is like a toadstool, I used a needle to trace lots of lines, starting from the underside and dragging them upwards. I also used a toothpick to soften the lines, and because of the tapered shape, and you can do this on all the lines or just on some of them. Next, I wrapped more tinfoil around the base of the house so I could add more clay on top. Cut away the excess and blend the clays together. Add texture to this clay as well so it blends with the baked clay. Then I baked the house for another 15 minutes. To make the tip of the roof, I rolled out a ball of clay into a teardrop, and using a ball tool first and then my fingers, I shaped it into a sort of hat. Once the dough was out of the oven and cool, I blended the pointy hat onto the roof and curled the end once it was already there. Then I added more details like the door, which apparently I didn't film either, but what I did wasn't different from my witch or hobbit house, and I also added a brick arch around it. To make the pebbles, I just rolled out a snake of clay, cut lots of pieces and stuck them to the base. I didn't add any frames around the windows, but I did add sort of balconies because I wanted to have some green on them, but you can add frames too. After adding texture and baking the jar again, I added clay below the door and shaped it into steps. Once I was happy with the look, I baked it again for about 15 minutes. Once the jar was cool, I used acrylic paint to paint it white, and I used the brush in a horizontal position so as not to get any paint in any of the grooves. I also didn't force any paint where it wouldn't naturally go, especially on the roof. I painted the roof with a gradient effect, applying a dark purple to the top third, a medium purple to the middle section and a pastel purple to the bottom third, blending them together to get more of a natural transition between the colours, and just as before, I'm not trying to force the paint in areas where the clay naturally dips. Next, I cleaned the windows with acetone to get rid of leftover paint or clay, but you can scrape it off too, and I began to add green bonding with fimo liquid, and to texture it I poked lots of tiny holes with a pointy tool. I also added a rose and went on to paint the door. I painted it a dark purple, but I didn't like it, so I painted it white again and decided to create another gradient effect using purple, lavender and mint. I painted more details, and once all the paint was dry, I carried on adding green. I also added bits of white clay on the roof and textured them very similarly to how I textured the green clay, but less than that, seeing as I wanted to keep the roundness and not make them flat. After baking it again, I sealed the bottom with more clay and baked the house one last time for about 40 minutes to make sure everything was cured through. Once cool, I added the last few details with acrylic paint where I thought necessary and added glass paint on the windows. If you use this kind of paint, you'll have to let it dry for about an hour or two in a horizontal position before moving on to the next window. The next day, I glazed the clay with matte varnish and let it dry completely. If you liked this tutorial and you love to see more fantasy houses, please give this video a thumbs up. And if you're new to my channel, hi, my name is Maive and I make videos like this every week, so go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss any. Thank you all so much for watching and I'll see you next time. Bye! Ciao ciao!